I once got to tell Jonah Goldberg's mother that I knew Jonah Goldberg before he was Jonah Goldberg. You have to go all the way back to the years during the first Clinton reign in Washington, sequel perhaps to come, who knows. When we were both young guys making our way in Washington, I still had my hair, so I'm jealous of him. And we'd get together for brunch now and then, just to kick things around. At that time, Jonah was becoming a pioneer in the early days of magazine websites as the founding editor of National Review Online, which quickly established itself as one of the top sites in the online world. Shortly thereafter, he launched a syndicated newspaper column, became a member of the board of contributors to USA Today, and a contributor to Fox News. As many of you, I'm sure, know, he's the author of 2 New York Times bestsellers, Liberal Fascism, The Secret History of the American Left from Mussolini to the Politics of Meaning, and more recently, The Tyranny of Clichés, How Liberals Cheat in the War of Ideas. Now, among his many memorable articles, 2 achievements in particular stand out. First, when the Los Angeles Times signed up Jonah to be a regular columnist, an outraged Barbara Streisand wrote in to cancel her subscription. Because, she said, she stood for diversity. Good to know that if her magnificent voice ever deserts her, she has a second career waiting for her as a college administrator. Took a while, right? Right. Second, although Jonah's skill as a political polemicist is unparalleled, I still wonder sometimes if he didn't miss his highest calling in life as a cultural critic. So on the day after we take notice of the passing of Harold Ramis, I urge everyone to go back and read his National Review cover story from several years ago about the greatness of Ramis's Groundhog Day, which is faithfully reposted every year for free on National Review Online on February 2nd. Jonah has written wonderfully about Breaking Bad, Sons of Anarchy, and other current totems of popular culture, but his Groundhog Day essay, like the movie and its motif, is one his faithful readers keep going back to over and over again. So Jonah, welcome to Boulder, and remember, don't cross the streams.
I'm starting my little timer thing. Is that too loud? Is that possible? No? Okay. I want to say thanks to Steve for having me out here. The students in the audience might be a little too young to remember this, but Robin Williams, or get it, but in the 1980s, Robin Williams had this great joke about how he wanted them to make sex an Olympic sport, just so they could see what the East Germans come up with. And when I found out that Steve had gotten this job as the professor of token conservatism, or whatever it's called, I kind of thought of that joke because in some ways he was sort of designed in an East German lab for this job. He's a happy warrior. He knows everything there is to know about conservatism, but also everything there is to know about a whole lot of other things. And I think that one of the things, I was very skeptical about this program when it first started at Boulder, but I've come to actually like it because one of the things I think, and I'm just saying this to the conservatives in the audience or the libertarians in the audience, is that there's too much ghettoization on the right, where we get into this place where we just want our Hillsdales and our magazines and our newspapers, and we say to hell with the rest of the culture. Well, it's our culture too. And just like you can't have you can't make new old friends, you can't have new old institutions. And at some point, if we actually believe what we believe, we have to start having these arguments where the arguments are to be had and not just talking to each other. There's a real problem on the right these days of people only talking to audiences that already agree with them. And I fear there may be a little of that tonight. That's fine with me, it makes it more fun. But as a general proposition, it's a problem. You know, when Ted Cruz goes around saying that he hasn't been, he goes, wherever I go in America, I just meet people who want to get rid of Obamacare. And I'm sure that's true. If you're working the circuit of Abilene tea parties and that kind of thing, you're going to meet a lot of people who agree with you. You know, it kind of reminds me when Richard Nixon was once asked if he believed in overpopulation, and he said, You know, of course I do. It's obvious the world is overpopulated. I mean, everywhere I go, I see huge crowds. Maybe that's because you're president of the United States. Maybe. You know. So anyway, I have sort of a difficult thing here. I'm supposed to make a serious argument, have a serious talk about serious ideas, which I believe in passionately. But I'm also allegedly supposed to be entertaining and all of that, which is complicated. You know, it sort of makes me feel like the guy who wants to be both a veterinarian and a taxidermist, because that way he can promise you'll get your dog back no matter what. Some of what I'm going to be talking about draws on a book that Steve mentioned, The Tyranny of Cliches. I'm happy to talk about liberal fascism if you like. It's, I think, now in 11 languages or something. Though oddly, not German or Italian. I'm not sure why. Someone will have to get back to me on that. So I read this book called The Tyranny of Cliches, which is indisputably the worst title of any book that's come out in a long time. First of all, it sounds like a really aggressive style guide to writing, you know, like Funkin' Wagnalls, The Tyranny of Cliches. This time it's personal. And much to my dismay, I would say something like a quarter of American, particularly conservative radio talk show hosts, don't know how to pronounce the word cliche. And it's very awkward when you're on it. Next up, Jonah Goldberg, author of The Tyranny of Cliches. So the book wasn't a style guide, it wasn't anything like that. It was basically an extended argument about the nature of American liberalism today, hopefully in a more entertaining way than liberal fascism. There's just not a lot of jokes you can make in a book about fascism, you know. Funny thing about the Holocaust, you know, just doesn't work. So the core argument of my book, The Tyranny of Cliches, was that contemporary American liberalism basically masquerades as a non-ideological ideology. So the first deceit that liberals tell is a deceit they tell themselves. They're sincere in it. They believe that they don't have an ideology, that they're simply problem solvers, fact finders, empiricists. Barack Obama loves to talk about how he's just a pragmatist and he wants to do what works. And you hear this all the time, and I argue, and I'm delighted to get into the philosophical weeds on this, I argue that this is all a descendant of the philosophical school of pragmatism. I don't mean, by pragmatism, I don't mean like being pragmatic as we do it in everyday life. You know, pragmatism has a real advantage. It's basically the only philosophy that has an everyday word that's the same word that sounds like a good thing, right? No one says, oh, let's be existential and just order pizza tonight, right? Well, let's just be pragmatic. It sounds like a good thing. But pragmatism as a philosophical school had a lot in common with Nietzsche's existentialism, and a lot of fans of both have made this argument many times, including Richard Rorty. They both argued, you know, what Nietzsche talked about was philosophizing with a hammer, breaking the existing dogmas and philosophies of the age, starting with the idea that God is alive. You know, he came out with the whole God is dead. Later, God came out with Nietzsche is dead. The pragmatists used what Louis Menand and others have called the pragmatist razor, which is basically the same approach. This idea of cutting through dogmas and philosophies and things that seem like they're eternal truths and breaking them down into usable nuggets to get what you want. What William James called the cash value of knowledge, or the cash value of truth. Basically, if it works for you, it's true. Which is basically a kind of sort of subjective way of talking about things. And liberalism, I argue, has imbibed all of this. They use the pragmatist razor to basically attack everybody else's ideology while claiming that they had no ideology themselves. And I'm glad to get deep into it, but I'll sort of move forward with it. You know, Barack Obama, there was a whole book by a philosopher who argued that Barack Obama's political philosophy was the greatest political incarnation of American pragmatism that we've ever seen. Barack Obama, is this going up and down a lot? I'm not, okay. How about this? Okay. Barack Obama, you know, the day before his inauguration, he gave a speech, and I think it was Philadelphia, maybe it was Baltimore, where he said, we as a country need a new Declaration of Independence. And what he meant by that was, well, what he said was, we need a new declaration in America. We need a new declaration from, we need to declare our independence from small-mindedness, bigotry, prejudice, and ideology. So his argument was, ideology is a really bad thing, like prejudice and bigotry and all the rest. And you don't say that if you don't, he wasn't talking about his ideology. He was talking about other people's ideology. Or, you know, Paul Krugman, you know, my favorite columnist, he famously said, you know, facts have a liberal bias. You know, there's a smattering of seats somewhere in the middle if you guys want to come on down, but it's up to you. I'm not the boss of you. You know, or think of the issue of abortion, right? And I have no interest whatsoever arguing about the actual merits of abortion, pro or con, pro-life, and all that kind of stuff. I have my own views on it. But the simple fact is that if you follow how the media covers the issue of abortion, they always treat pro-lifers as ideologues, as these people hidebound, dogmatic, inflexible, beholden to an idea or an ideology that doesn't take account of the real lives that people live. That is the way it is always talked about in the press, at least the mainstream press. Meanwhile, abortion is never talked about being pro-choice is never talked about as being an ideological position. Now, my point here is that both are ideological positions. They're all based on core philosophical assumptions about either the sovereignty of a woman and her ability to control her own life, or the sovereignty of a human life. I don't know what's going on here. I think it's messing with my pacemaker. Is it just too high up?
Might be. I think it works on this panel here, so let me try this a bit. Keep going.
Yeah, that's definitely messing with my pacemaker.